Okay, everybody, thank you very much for joining us. For those of you who are just coming in, as I've mentioned a few times, there's coffee and some water over here. For those of you on the phone, I'm afraid you can't avail yourself of that, but we appreciate you joining the webinar. Before we get started, I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping. Restrooms are just down the hallway on the right-hand side, so past the security station. And for those of you on the phone, we currently have all the attendees muted from our end. We're going to take questions and answers after the presentation, so at that point we will unmute the lines, and if you could please do me a favor at that point and mute your own computer. All of you are accessing through the webinar, so please make sure you have a microphone with your headset that'll allow you to ask questions. Otherwise, if you type them into the dialog box, we'll make sure to respond from our end. So my name is Marco Anderson. I'm Program Manager in the Sustainability Department, and we're here to present the Sustainable Communities Program workshop. And so this is covering the entire range of projects that we're going to be putting out a call for applications for. Okay, so this first slide is just an introduction to the history of sustainable communities planning here at SCAG. So it goes back to 2000 with the growth visioning process. Some of you are familiar with the term COMPASS. The COMPASS Blueprint was the name of the grant program from 2005 until 2013. As you can see, we've had periodic calls for applications averaging about every three years. And you can see how they've also intersected with our quadrennial RTP SCS, or originally RTP. So with the passage of SB 375 in 2013, we renamed the program the Sustainability Grants. And they were focused on implementing the SCS that we had recently passed. The next call is a call for applications, because we are going to be streamlining the process, and we are putting out applications for 9 specific project types. So this is not an open call for applications. We've had those successfully in the past, but now we really need to focus on the best practices and strategies for implementing the SCS. So for those of you who are familiar with the past of the program, we are not accepting applications for kind of a wide range of ideas. As valuable of an effort as that is, this is not what this call is for. So the program goals are to provide needed planning resources to local jurisdictions, to develop local plans that support the implementation of the 2016 Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategies, or RTP-SES, and to increase the region's competitiveness for federal and state funds. And so these are, for example, California Active Transportation, the ATP program, and greenhouse gas reduction funds. If you're on the line, please make sure you mute your microphone or headset. So there are 3, just as in the past, since 2013, there are still 3 main categories: active transportation, integrated land use, and green region initiatives. If you're not familiar with them, active transportation is pretty self-evident. Integrated land use is land use and transportation planning. Green region initiatives are climate action and resource conservation. So the successful applicants will be receiving technical assistance this time. As in the past, our program is one of technical assistance where SCAG completes the procurement and provides the services. In the last 2 rounds, we have had a number of instances in which we worked with cities to draft MOUs and pass funds to the city. We will not be doing that this time. So it's strictly technical assistance. For the active transportation program, SCAG will complete the procurement for the submitted scope of work under those 4 product categories. For the ILU and GRI projects, there are actually specific deliverables that we will be providing to the city, so you can choose those, but you can't really amend those. So the available funding is up to $6 million, $4.4 million of Cycle 4 ATP funds for AT projects, and $1.6 million in SCAG SB1 formula funds. And so a significant portion of that will be available regardless of the results of the repeal effort. However, some of the funds will be canceled out in the event of repeal, and then we'll deal with that as that comes available. So we are planning the initial procurement based on the existing available funds, not on the funds that are variable. So if the repeal fails, then we'll have extra money, and we have plans on what to do with that in the event that that happens. So the project category goals for the Integrated Land Use and Green Region Initiative, again, these are more similar, and so they're grouped together both in the application process and in the goals. Promote implementation, encourage project implementation at the city level, promote reliable and efficient mobility while meeting GHG reduction goals. Going to identify areas for strategic infill and investment, support sustainability, adaptation, and resiliency, and focus new growth around transit and livable corridors. And we'll get to what livable corridors means when we a little bit further on. For active transportation is obviously increase biking and walking, increase safety and mobility, promote implementation of the RTP SES, and produce plans that provide for future ATP applications. Increase the overall budget for active transportation planning and capacity building in the region. So again, as you can see in both major categories, one of the major goals is teeing up cities for implementation funds further on down the line through either greenhouse gas reduction funds or ATP in that case, or other state funding sources. So the SCP project types for the Integrated Land Use and Green Region Initiative, I'm going to just name them off here and then we'll go through them slide by slide. SB 743 implementation assistance. There's various parking strategies, livable corridor and TOD planning, heat island reduction with urban greening and cool streets, and EV charging infrastructure planning. So 743 implementation assistance is modeled on some work that we've currently been doing with WRCOG, and basically it's meant to tee up the city to adopt VMT-based thresholds for CEQA purposes. So the main deliverables will be a VMT baseline data, thresholds calculation methodology and mitigation measures, VMT forecasting tool, memorandum of advanced or regional VMT mitigation measure strategies, and a number of other deliverables that'll get the city ready to adopt VMT as your CEQA measurement of transportation. So parking pricing reduction and management strategies are really kind of what they are, also very self-evident. We'll provide parking utilization and pickup and drop-off studies. So it's combining parking with also looking at T&C operations on your local streets. We're envisioning this, unless you're a very small jurisdiction, envisioning this more on a district basis. So how would you create like a parking district? So you have a main street or a traditional downtown. Parking standards, recommendation report, maps and visualizations, draft model ordinance, and the other deliverables you see here. For livable corridor and transit-oriented development, the easiest way to think about this is so much of our TOD planning has centered around rail stations. So this is really thinking about TOD planning in the context of high-quality bus lines that may run through your city. And so what we're doing is providing demographic and socioeconomic profile of a corridor, conceptual land use plans, phasing strategies, an inventory of corridor streetscape, and other types of TOD planning, but again, centered around a livable corridor that would feature bus transit, active transportation, and connectivity along the corridor. Heat island reduction with urban greening and cool streets. This is under the Green Region Initiatives category. Inventory of trees, inventory of existing conditions report of streets, sidewalks, and paths, a palette of recommended trees, plants, and cool street construction materials, and strategies for short-term and long-term maintenance of urban forest and cool surface materials. If you look at the guidelines, it specifies a very specific size of the area that you're going to be covering, and so it's really about using green streets and urban greening to connect pedestrian access to transit facilities. For electric vehicle charging infrastructure planning, this is similar to work that has already been done in a number of cities and subregions, and SCAG has done for the region as a whole, and it's really an inventory using a lot of the data that we produced for the 2012 PEV readiness plan. It's looking at the PEV registrations in your jurisdiction, charging stations, workplaces, and multi-unit dwellings, which is the Energy Commission's way of saying multifamily housing. And it's evaluation of local barriers to PEV charging infrastructure, identification of potential EVSE, or that's charging station sites. And so again, this is really about providing you with a snapshot of how is your city currently wired for public charging. What are the main stakeholders that you could approach to increase charging at workplaces and at multifamily housing sites? I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Rybarg, who will cover the active transportation side.
Thanks, Marco. Good afternoon, everyone. Rybarg with Active Transportation Special Programs. Going to be talking you through some of the categories we have on the active transportation side of things. So we have 4 categories, which I'll go into in a second. But before I kind of dive into each of them, I want to just stress the importance that whereas on the Green Region side, they've kind of set out specifically what you're going to get. Here, we're kind of looking for your innovation, pushing the envelope in terms of the infrastructure that you might want to apply for in something like a quick build. Definitely want to see deep levels of community engagement, whether that's through demonstration projects, working with your community-based organizations. And lastly, there are so many resources available these days for planning in terms of data or our Go Human campaign. We really want to see you integrate those existing resources into your project. So the first category is community-wide and area plans. The funding cap on these went up from $200,000 to $250,000 this year. These are plans to develop recommended investments for infrastructure and programmatic activities. So your plans should support the RTP SES and meet the requirements of the Active Transportation Program Cycle 4. They have very specific requirements in there. But really, they should look at seeding project concepts for future funding. So I think what's more important for us to see here is a list of 4 to 5 immediately implementable projects than 300 projects that may just sit on the shelf forever. So really want to look at that implementability of the plan. And then most of your regions will have either at the COG level or at the county level some additional planning. So considering those, and then where possible, incorporating regional data tools. So examples would be a bicycle or a pedestrian master plan, complete active transportation plan, or first last mile plans to transit. Second category are regional corridor plans. This is where you may have a major arterial or some a greenway network, and these are looking to really do that planning to tee you up for a grant application. So these plans as well should be consistent with RTP SES. They should include coordination with your neighboring jurisdictions if that corridor you're looking at is going to be going into major other jurisdictions or affect the travel from other jurisdictions. You should really be looking to seek kind of develop a coordinated vision for the corridor. And unfortunately, we have planning funding here, so this would not be an engineering level design for the corridor, but it should be good enough to get you kind of the estimates to maybe apply for an active transportation plan. So some examples are a regional greenway network to plan for, which might be on your utility corridors, a regional bicycle network, or there's a county-wide regional bikeway network is another option. And a couple examples are Aviation Boulevard or some work we've done in San Gabriel Valley on their greenway implementation plan. Next are our quick build projects. I think these are going to be very fun and super exciting. The limit here is 500,000. And these are really to test infrastructure designs before committing to that permanent solution. So this is an evolution of our previous Go Human campaign, Go Human events, where our previous projects were connected to kind of a 1 or a 2-day event with the city. These are looking for about a 3-month build out and keeping it out there so that the community really has a chance to test out those infrastructure designs, and so that your engineers can go out and say, okay, maybe this isn't working so well, maybe we need to tweak this here, and then taking the project out. So they are temporary. They should include things such as pedestrian bulb outs and sidewalk widenings, visibility and daylighting treatments, and we really want to see you push the envelope if we're talking about bicycle infrastructure, looking at like separated bikeways and things like that. So As I mentioned, they should be installed a minimum of 3 months, and they should be installed probably on your local streets, since that's where you'll have control. If we're talking about things where you need to work with Caltrans right-of-way, that's going to make the project much more complicated and difficult to execute, but not impossible. And then if you are really looking at a long corridor or something that's going to go way above this 500,000, then you're going to want to be able to bring some additional resources to that project. So just a couple pictures to kind of give you examples. Here we're using kind of temporary paint or bollards to demonstrate what a curb extension would look like on the one on the left. And here's a kind of a quick build of a bicycle implementation where you're looking at using bollards and paint and planters and stuff to redesign the roadway. Just a few more examples from a pedestrian side of things, looking at crosswalks where you can paint in the curb extensions, maybe instead of building them right away, and some kind of temporary design items. Last strategy, or last category, sorry, is our safety strategy plan. And these are really looking at plans that aim to reduce transportation-related serious injuries and fatalities. They should leverage state and regional planning efforts. SCAG recently released a safety report that you guys should probably look into if you're interested in this. They should definitely be data-driven, context-sensitive. These are not necessarily restricted to active transportation planning. We do have some additional funding in there if you're looking at vehicle collisions as well. So examples of these could be a Vision Zero plan or corridor safety plan. All right, last two kind of items on the active transportation side of things are our additional Go Human opportunities. We have a kit of parts is what we're calling it, and this is for demonstration projects. So if you are doing a active transportation plan and you want to demonstrate some infrastructure during maybe a community event, you can rent the kit of parts from us, set up your demonstration project for a day or a week or something like that, and then pull it down afterwards. And I'll show you a video on that in a second. Likewise, we have a lot of advertising materials from our Go Human campaign, and these can be used as part of outreach. We have a lot of educational materials that could be used as engagement strategies, and they could also be used as part of your quick build strategy to inform the public on bicycle and pedestrian safety during that project. So hope you can leverage some of those as well. So I will attempt to play this, and hopefully the sound works. Right, so just things that are easy to set up, easy to take down for those demonstration projects. Likewise, here's just some examples of some of our Go Human advertising materials. We have things, everything from billboards, we've done bus shelters, worked with local agencies on lawn signs. We have a number of social media posts and stuff that are easy to kind of integrate into whatever project you're working on. So are we pausing there for questions, Marco? We're going to go all the way straight to the end. All right. All right, now we're going to dive into the application. Sorry, you're going to hear me talking a lot here. So diving into the application, just kind of on the scoring criteria, this is the same across all categories. However, the points are allocated slightly different between the active transportation side of things and the grain region, just depending on the project type. Even within active transportation, some of the questions are different for some of these, and the points are kind of lumped together depending on the project that you're working at. But at a high level, there's about 50 points for project need, 35 points for goals and objectives and outcomes, and 15 points for leveraging. On the application itself, there's pretty standard stuff like filling in your project name and agency. We do ask that you prioritize your applications if you're submitting more than one, if you're submitting them in multiple categories, so that we can understand which are your agency's key priorities. And then there's a little bit of different information that's requested. Since on the green regions and integrated land use side of things, the scope is kind of set out for you. We're not asking you for any budget information. We're really just asking you to provide the need for your project. On the active transportation, we are still asking you for your start date and end date and all those kind of things and your total requested amount. As well, on the active transportation side, you still must submit a schedule, a scope of work, and a budget in the Excel file format that is on the website. One quick change from last time on the budget, please just use what you estimate as a fully burdened rate. We've removed all the indirect stuff that gave everybody such a headache and estimating all that. So just assume what you would be a fully burdened rate for any of the staff that you expect a consultant would use to implement that project. For partnering agencies, consider them if they're going to be really engaged in the project. They should probably provide a letter of support. Likewise, if you're doing kind of a regional corridor project and you might be impacting your neighboring cities, you might want to include letters of support from them. And then on the RFP side of things, if you include people in the application, they may be precluded from bidding on the project, right? Because they had a hand in developing the application and therefore would have a competitive advantage. So if there are people that you want to be able to bid on the project, they should not help you fill out the application, and they should definitely not be listed as a partnering agent here. Because we will put out the RFP and we have to follow Caltrans standards on selecting those consultants and or nonprofits or whoever is bidding on that. For the green region, we're asking for a little bit more contact information this time on those partners so that we can coordinate them a little bit better. From the active transportation side of things, we really just need to know who they are on that side of things. I think one of the things that folks was kind of an issue last time that we want to make sure is really clear this time is there's a couple things you should look at for all of the questions when responding to them. The first is the prompt above the question, kind of what we're getting you to think about when answering the question. The second is the scoring criteria. We're telling you in the application exactly what we're looking for when we're scoring these applications. So you should be looking at both the prompt and the scoring criteria. And then a number of questions ask you to attach a letter of support or additional things. That needs to be there because you'll be scored on whether or not it's there. So when you're reading these questions, please respond to all three items in developing your response. Last kind of administrative thing, I think for now, is on the active transportation side of things. We did this last time is we will charge a 5% fee if you'd like SCAG to administer it. We take care of all of your Caltrans allocation paperwork, your environmental paperwork, your reporting. We issue the request for proposals for you, help you select the consultant. Then the consultant just comes and works for you. So we didn't have anybody want to take that on last time by themselves, but we're still, the option is there if you would like to go do all that paperwork yourself. So now I'm going to dive into, most of the stuff is on the active transportation side for the data, because we're asking a couple specific questions. So I just wanted to run through how we calculated this and how you should be calculating this. On the safety side, we have kind of two options. If you're doing a citywide plan, we've already calculated the numbers by mode. So you just go to that spreadsheet, pull the number, plug it in. If you're doing a smaller project, you have to do a little bit of math. And basically what you're going to do is create a weighted average. You go select all your census tracts that your project is covering, sum those collisions up, and just divide by the population for all those tracts. So just as an example, here's 3 census tracts from Los Angeles County. There were a total of 5 collisions. Total population was 8,672, and that gives you that score. You'll plug that into the application, and our reviewers will just give you the points for wherever that, in this case, would be 3 points. We tried to make as much of this, the data, easy for you to get your hands on as possible, but we couldn't kind of guess on where your exact projects would be. So on the health side of things, similarly, if you're doing a citywide project or a smaller project, you're going to have to go to the Healthy Places Index. and get that score from them. Up on the right-hand side of their mapping tool, which is quite good, you can choose either the city or the census tract level geography. If you choose city, then you just click on the city you're interested in. It'll pop up the score from you. You just put it in your application. We'd appreciate it if you also do a print screen and attach that so we can double check it for you. Second thing is if you're working with census tracts, you go over to the pooling tool on the left. You just click on the census tracts that are in your project area, click pool. It'll pool it, generate the score for you. It's pretty straightforward and easy. Disadvantaged communities. First, I apologize that this is quite complicated, but the state has, I think, 5 different definitions for disadvantaged communities, so we provided each option to you. Again, on a city level, we've pre-calculated that for you. You can go there, you can see which one kind of is the best option for your city. If you are doing a smaller project, you're gonna, again, have to do a little bit of math. One note here is that we pre-calculated everything except for free and reduced price lunch. So if you're doing kind of a safe routes to school type project, you can go to our active transportation database, load the schools layer, and just click on the school, and that'll give you your percentage. But all the other ones are in the Excel spreadsheet, which is on the sustainability page. So here's just an example of the points that we're giving for each different version for Cal Enviro Screen or our environmental justice areas. And if you are a smaller project, again, this time you're just going to create a weighted average. So you pull your census tracts, which are the top 2 lines here, multiply them by the score you're going to use. So if it's Cal Enviro Screen, you'd use 3 times 8,000. You'll get your adjusted numbers there, total those up, divide by the total population, and that'll give you your score. We've got the directions in the Excel spreadsheet. And if you have any questions on how to calculate any of this, it sounds complicated. I think once you do it, it shouldn't be too hard. But if you have any questions, just contact us. All right, last thing is on letters of support. We do require these for a number of questions on the safety, public health, and public participation question. You do get points for each of these, so make sure that there are separate letters for each one. So that should be a total of 5. And provide in the letters, there should be some bullet points on exactly how they're going to participate in the project. It's not just our public health thinks this project is a good idea. It's they're going to provide, maybe sit on the technical advisory committee. They're going to provide data. They're going to provide insight on the project moving forward. The only project category where we are requiring a local match is on our quick builds. And this is primarily because we expect a lot of agencies are going to want to do projects that are possibly bigger than our amount. So we're giving some extra funding here. It does have to be a cash match for this. The application signature page is a separate document. We would like you to get this signed, save it as a PDF, and send it separately. Please do not attach it to the front of your regular application package because we're going to be exporting the data directly out of your PDF. So we want these as 2 separate documents. The signature page should be signed by your city manager or your equivalent. And we also require the sub-applicants to sign those as well. Here's just a high overview of what you would want to provide with your application and kind of the formatting here. On the integrated land use and green region, you just need that separate signature page and your saved application. On the active transportation side of things, you need your saved application, your budget, schedule, and scope of work in the Excel document, your combined letters of support, your signature page, and your attachments. All applications should be emailed to scp@scag.ca.gov by Thursday, November 15th at 5 p.m. All right, just a quick link is here in case anybody needs it, but all this information can be found on our sustainability webpage under the 2018 call for applications. And just a reminder that the deadline is November 15th to get your application in, and regional council approval will be on March 7th of 2019. The funding, do you want to cover this one?
Okay, I wanted to, before we go on, I did want to address one other thing regarding the signature page. For the ILU and GRI projects, unfortunately, I just realized that we forgot to put it in here, but there is in the guidelines a chart that describes who are eligible applicants and who are the eligible sub-applicants. So cities, counties, transit agencies. So it's basically the eligibility standards for SB1 funding in general. That's the one that we're using. And so there's a number of agencies that are eligible to be applicants. COGs and sub-regional agencies are not eligible to be prime applicants. However, if they want to apply for a multi-jurisdictional project, they simply need to get a city manager from one of their member cities to sign as the authorizing signature, and then the COG would sign as the sub-applicant. So even though the COG is the prime applicant, they're signing the signature page as a sub-applicant. The main signature has to be one of the eligible applicants. So getting back to the timeline, as was mentioned, the deadline is where do we get it? Application workshop is today. The deadline is November 15th. Another thing, please get your applications in early. If you're sending it in at 4:59, if you have any kind of issue, it will be deemed, and it doesn't make it in by 5 p.m., it will be deemed, late and therefore ineligible. So, we have tracking on our end as to when items were emailed in. So there could be an issue with your file size or something like that, or a slowdown in your network. Last time we did disqualify 2 applicants. And it's really sad because you don't want to do that to people after they've worked very hard, but there's nothing we can do about it. 5:01 is late. So again, don't want to be harsh about that, but we'd rather be harsh now than being harsh on the 15th. So the funding will be available for all the projects March 2019. So the procurement process will then kick off, as Rai mentioned, between March and July is what we hope to do. For the AT projects, it'll be technical assistance in the sense that SCAG will be procuring a consultant based on your scope of work. For the GRI and ILU projects, what we are hoping to do is actually bundle multiple projects into one consultant contract. So therefore, that's why we have these sort of prescriptive deliverables. The project kickoffs we're hoping for summer 2019, and project completion December 2020. So we know that that's a very tight timeline, but we think as long as we get stuff rolling, with our deadline, then we should be able to meet all those timelines. So the other active transportation project types, Brian probably was going to cover this a little bit better, would be California Transportation Commission approval of ATP projects is in June of 2019. Funding will be available in January 2020. The procurement process will be February through July 2020, project kickoff July 2020, project completion 2023. So you can see that the AT project types are a little bit more like Caltrans and like Metro Call for Projects applications, where we determine the project, the awardees in the near term, but then really your projects will get started a little bit more medium to long term. So here are the contact details for myself and Rybarg, and also for Caitlin Sims. I would say for any AT questions, you might want to start with Rai. For GRI or ILU questions, please start with Caitlin, and then I'll work closely with her. If you get a bounce back from her or I, just contact the other person. And really what Rai said is very true, especially with those data questions. Our experience, Caitlin tested them out, and at first they seem very complicated, but once you start looking up the data tables and plugging the numbers in, it's not as hard as it sounds. But please give us a call if you have any questions. We're here to, you are not consultants. This is not an RFP at this point. We're here to work with you. We want to see the best applications possible. So feel free to contact us with questions, and we're ready to help you. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and take questions. Rai, one more point.
Thanks, Margo. Sarah corrected me. There are no requirements for match for any of the active transportation programs the only ones we're accepting match to get extra points for are the quick builds. So it's incentive to provide extra match, but you're not required to provide it.
Okay, and we're both going to stand up here because there's probably going to be a mix of questions for both programs. So I saw a hand up during the presentation. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question? Go ahead and hit the mic on your machine. It's the talking head or talking face button.
Okay, so for the priority ranking, is that for jurisdictions or for agencies?
That's for you to fill out from your jurisdiction's perspective. So let's say you apply you submit multiple applications. You submit one for cool streets and one for livable corridors. We want to know which one you guys think is most important. We may not award that one because it'll depend on a number of other factors, but we'd like to know that. And same from the AT perspective. You might apply for a safety plan and you might apply for a quick build. Which one is, if you're only going to get one, so which one is going to be more important? Okay, let's start the questions right here. And go ahead and use your microphone. So it's just a talking face. And also introduce yourself and what agency you're with.
Linda, LSA. Do you define match as a one-to-one match, or could it be any kind of ratio?
The match there isn't a requirement on the match. That's for extra points, and it's cash match only, not in kind. So it can be whatever the city determines, and it's only for the quick build project. No other project type has we're accepting match. Yes.
For the quick build projects, it sounds like we would use SCAG's consultant. Would this provide design and construction of the quick build measures, or how would it work?
Yeah, this is kind of an evolution, as I said, of our Go Human events. So usually what we do there is we hire a consultant to work with the community, or our SCAG staff works directly with the community to host a community advisory committee. They come up with a design and they flesh that out. So in this case, there's kind of a less of an event piece of it attached, but the consultant would work on that design and help implement it.
Okay. But are these final design documents that we would get for the quick build measures, and who would actually implement them in the field, and how would we procure the material?
The consultant would put the bollards and do all the painting and all of that kind of stuff.
Okay, so the consultant would, it wouldn't be a contractor.
Right.
Okay.
Again, they're temporary.
Yeah.
They're long-term temporary, but
yeah.
Just going
and
back.
what's your name? And,
Oh, sorry,
who you with?
Nancy Lippin, B&A Consulting. Just going back to the awards of prioritizing your projects, if a city has something like they want to do electric charging station and maybe a TOD, they're going to they have to prioritize which one they want, and they will only get awarded one, even if it's competitive.
Problem, I mean, with the competitiveness that we have, I mean, it's not a policy that they'll only be awarded one, but
Chances are.
Chances are.
And
so that, in a sense, is just their way of saying, you know, we'd love to do both of these, but really, if we're only going to get one, this is the one we want to fund.
Okay.
But they may not get that one. The other one may be more competitive for a number of reasons.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Cesar with LA County Bicycle Coalition. You had mentioned that there are like different sizes of applications. So what's considered a smaller project? Like, is there a breakdown of the different sizes? Because you had mentioned that there's a different numeration that's involved with smaller projects.
Oh, so if it's not a citywide project, it's easiest for us to calculate the data on a citywide basis.
Okay.
But if you're just doing a corridor,
Got it.
you'd have to go in and look at the census tracts for any of that information.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Hi, Pamela Lee, LADOT. I had a quick question on how you're going to be allocating the funds. In the past, you guys have awarded projects and then you've committed to funding all of them. Is that the same process that you're going to be doing for this cycle?
No. We don't expect, we don't have the kind of money to do that. So that's not likely to be the case. Yes.
On the greening project, Daniel Berger, Tree People. On the greening projects where a CBO or nonprofit could be a sub-applicant, co-applicant, and designates a project manager, would administrative fees be eligible for funding?
No, because you're not receiving funding. you'll be receiving consultant services.
Understood.
And also just pointing out, if you as a nonprofit, again, goes back to what Rye said, if you as a nonprofit are going to work with a city to kind of scope out a project, you would not be eligible to apply to conduct the project. So, and again, you won't be receiving any funding from the grant. We will be hiring a consultant who will do the project for the city and provide the deliverables. I'm going to take a quick break. Do we have?
Yeah, we have several online.
Okay, let's quickly address some online questions, and then we'll open the microphones as well to the participants.
And this one has kind of been answered, but for the quick builds, is there a minimum match requirement?
No.
And then what happens if SB1 is repealed?
So as I mentioned, the planning for the GRI and ILU projects is based on already secured SB1 funding, and so we will be able to do a certain amount of projects in all of those 5 categories. If SB1 is not repealed, then we'll have additional money.
And on the active transportation side, the state still has not yet determined what happens to the active transportation program portion of SB1 fundings, but assuming that would disappear, it would mean a reduction in funding for the whole program, which would, of course, filter down to this pot of money, and it could also push the project years back a little bit.
All right, and then for the regional corridor plans, would a plan for a protected creek multi-use path extension be eligible?
Wait, protected what?
A protected creek multi-use path extension, so I'm assuming along.
Yes.
And then one more for now, for the corridor and TOD planning, does the livable corridor designation apply only to certain corridors already determined by SCAG, or can it apply to any corridor meeting a certain set of criteria?
It would apply to any corridor meeting a certain set of criteria.
All right, and we have some more. Do you want to keep going for the online ones? Okay, cool. For the SB 743 implementation, would a project be disqualified if there is an approved budget and consultant selected already by the agency, even though the actual work hasn't started yet?
It's very specific. No, it would, but you would, I mean, basically if you started doing the work, then yes, the city would be disqualified. But if you're going to cancel your consultant and wait until November and then wait until you're awarded funding, I wouldn't necessarily advise that. Right.
And then, did Rye say that under the safety strategic plans that you could apply for a corridor safety plan?
Yes.
Okay. Do we, Ed, if you're in the control room, could you please, I don't know if we did successfully mute all the attendees, but could you please unmute them?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And do we have any questions in the room? Yes.
Yeah. The funding.
Oh, you got to hit your mic there.
I'm sorry, John King, City of Paramount.
Thank you.
I noticed in the guidelines, there's the funding issue that said a jurisdiction has to have the housing element substantially in compliance with HCD, I guess.
Yes.
Could you speak to what substantially in compliance means?
I'm not a housing expert, but I don't think it's a pretty clear definition. You're either in or out of compliance.
Yeah, and what we're looking for, if your housing element has been like approved by the state, by HCD, and then also you've submitted your annual progress reports as required.
So would I think there's something, we're almost there in Paramount, as an example, we're almost there with a conditional approval, which gives a time period to get one last thing done. Do you think that kind of conditional approval would be okay?
I want to tentatively say yes. We can answer that for sure. But I want to tentatively say yes.
Yeah, it would have to be approved by the time of the award, so of the actual funding of the project. So technically, it wouldn't have to be, I would apply anyways, because if you're not, if it's not approved by November 15th, but it gets approved before we get around to funding your project, then that's when you'd have to show that it was approved.
That's just for GRI.
And that's just for the ILU and GRI project categories, that not for the AT. So, mind if I SB1 funding. Okay, other questions?
Alan Loomis, City of Santa Monica. Two quick questions. One, it's a very useful presentation. Can you make that available?
Yes, we will be posting it.
Okay. And then you'd be hiring consultants in the past. You've had a bench. Do you have that bench put together, and would you be willing to share that list with us?
No, we do not have a bench. We haven't had a bench since like 2008, and so on the I don't believe you guys have a bench.
No, we have sometimes bundled like projects and gone out for a single RFP. If we have like 3 planning studies that are very similar in the same county or something like that, but we don't have a bench.
So the consultant community would be open, anybody in the consultant community to pursue.
Right. However, on the GRI ILU side, we are thinking we're probably going to try and put together a scope and release it very shortly after the applications come in. So we'll probably be procuring the consultant about the same time as we're evaluating the proposals. The goal would be to possibly have a consultant brought on soon enough to kind of assist in evaluating the projects for which they would do. So we would scope out, we want to do X number of greening projects under this scope, and here's what we think the budget is, internally. And we would release that out and see what the consulting community comes back with in terms of projects. And then we would look at the applications and say, okay, we have that many applications that qualify, so let's match them.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have any other questions? Do we have any questions on the line? We now have unmuted all the attendees. If you have a headset with microphone, you should be able to ask questions.
And I do have one more typed question.
Okay.
Are there sample scopes for types of projects such as first last mile or area-wide active plans?
There's a scope from last time around, but the ATP guidelines have changed a little bit. So if you look on our previous 2017 call, you can find that sample scope of work there, but not at this time.
Okay, any other questions in the room? No.
For the SB 743, is it the jurisdictions applying for a set scope of services, or could those services be tailored to meet what the jurisdiction needs? I guess what the question is we have our own model that has been developed, is going through an updating process. And so if we were to use SCAG's consultant, would these services only apply using the SCAG model, or could it be applied to be tailored towards the model that we're in process of updating?
I mean, they're going to be customized to individual, how to put this, the deliverables and the process will be the same, because we're going to likely be doing like 5 different SB 743 projects with the same consultant kind of working on them at the same time, but they're obviously going to take your local context into account. It's not like you're going to get, at the end of the day, the outcomes, the products will be developed for your jurisdiction. In terms of your question about the model, they would necessarily have to be, get to know your model and how that's going to interact with the thresholds and the analysis. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it sounds like there's flexibility.
There'll be flexibility. There won't be flexibility on the deliverables. There will be flexibility on how they're developed for your city.
Got it. Thank you.
Another, do I have to press it again? No?
Yeah, no, you're
Nope,
on.
I'm on. Okay. So if two cities are doing something together, like a demonstration, one city's already gotten funding and it connects to another city, the other city that hasn't gotten that SCAG funding but needs the additional money to make the connection between the others, like 2 cities are close together. Can that one city ask for funding even though the other city is the one project that they're doing together? They've gotten funding for Go Human.
I'm not sure. I'm gonna let Rai, but partly it's if they've already, you mean they've already been funded in a previous round?
One city has, but now another city that we represent would like to add funds to it from their city perspective. They have not gotten funding for it, but they want to connect to.
Are you talking about our previous round of Go Human funding?
It
Does
it matter?
Yeah, it doesn't matter for
Okay.
previous rounds. In this situation, for this round, we're not really taking co-applicants.
Okay.
So each city should pretty much apply on their own.
Okay.
Yeah, and they would be judged individually.
Okay.
However, you're not doing any more co-human.
But we're not doing any more Go Human events. We're just doing the quick builds.
Right, but it's, yeah, right.
Yes.
Okay, we don't have any questions on the line. Do we have any more questions in the dialog box? Okay, any more questions in the room? Okay, going once, twice. All right, well, thank you very much all for coming. Like we stressed, please reach out to us with any further questions you may have. Please do not work with consultants to develop your scope of work, as they could potentially be excluded from applying for that scope of work. I mean, if they want to work with you and have no interest in doing getting the money once the project's out, then that's fine. But yeah, do not work with if you work with a consultant and it comes to light, then they will not be able to apply for that work. But other than that, thank you very much for joining us. And again, can't iterate enough how many times. If you have any questions, let us know.